Hello guys and welcome to my new video. I hope everyone had some happy holidays, but today we're going to look at the best healers or the state of healers based in Mythic Plus content, based in high-end Mythic rating. We're going to be looking at Race to World first. We're going to be looking at some more casual content. This video will help you to decide which healer, for example, is going to provide you the most HPS, which healer is going to get you invites in Mythic Plus, because let's be honest, healing Mythic Plus right now is probably one of the hardest thing or role that you can play. We're going to be looking at Raid, we're going to be looking at Mythic Plus, we're going to be looking at some of the healers that are doing too well or could get a nerf or balancing changes, we'll have to see. But this video is all about helping you to choose which healer to play or which healer is going to give you the most value for your money in terms of, or depending on what content you want to do. So let's go and get started with Raid. And what you see right now is a graph that highlights HPS or healing per second for 75 percentile. So if you're playing your healer to an average or above average capabilities in Mythic Vault of the Incarnates, you'll probably see a similar graph, or you should expect a similar graph in terms of pure HPS. You will see that Preservation Evokers are quite ahead in terms of pure HPS that they can provide under these circumstances. Now, if you go to the 99 percentile, so if you're playing your class to near perfection, the graph changes a little bit in terms of, hey, Resto Druids are coming back. And this is something that you will see when you're looking at HPS. HPS is not the only factor that makes healer great, because there's a lot of healers out here. You'll see, for example, Holy Paladins, Resto Shamans, you'll see Discipline Priest. They all provide damage reduction cooldowns that will not show up on these HPS charts. So Discipline Priest has Barrier, which provides 25% damage reduction, but people are required to stack. That is not going to show up. But Discipline Priest damage reduction in terms of the Barrier is one of the strongest damage reduction cooldowns that you can provide in game, and if you can manage it properly, it is very, very good. If you're someone who's just looking to play a class that's going to make you, how do I say, top of the HPS meters or top of the meters, Preservation Evoker is the undisputed king. Right now, Preservation Evoker is going to be regarded as, hey, a healer that can be stacked, especially because of the last boss, Razaget. It is one of those bosses which provides or does a lot of pushback, and a lot of the guilds, including Liquid, including Echo, including a lot of the upcoming Race to World First guilds are going to be stacking at least 2 Preservation Evokers, because they do have things like Rescue, which allows you to grab your friendly, let's say, Priest or immobile class like Priest, who cannot really ignore the pushback easily. It allows you to grab them and kind of avoid that mechanic. So not only Preservation Evoker is one of the top HPS healers right now, it also provides some significantly important utility on the last mythic boss, which is going to be the hardest boss, and most people will spend majority or 90% of their vibes on that boss, just to showcase how important the last boss in Mythic Race to World First is. But okay, we get it. Preservation Evoker, very strong HPS, strong utility. There's multiple different builds. You can play the green build with Emerald Blossoms, especially people are stacked. You can also play something like the bronze build, where you're using your, how do I say, your essence abilities for echoes, and then you can either use things like Verdant Embrace to provide some instant healing, or use things like Reversion with your tier set, which makes you like an ultimate hot healer. So there are multiple builds for Preservation Evoker, there are multiple gameplays for Preservation Evoker. It provides decent utility or really strong utility on certain bosses, and it is the HPS king of this tier. What is not to like if you're looking to play or mainly raid in Dragonflight? But let's not talk about Preservation only. There is something really important to highlight here. Restoration Druid. Now you're looking at Restoration Druid. This is 99 percentile. If we go back to 75 percentile for more average play, you'll see Restoration Druid is climbing. And why is that? Because Restoration Druid received a 5% overall healing buff. They also received some buffs to some of the raid talents, and this happened halfway through the race. The charts are starting to show the buff, because it does take a little time to trickle down the class changes. So you'll see Resto Druids climbing and climbing because they did get the buff, and also you have to consider that a lot of the times, even in Mythic raiding, healers might not have all of the tier sets. I'm not talking about Liquid, I'm not talking about Echo, I'm not talking about Method and all those top end Race to World First guilds. They all have the 4 set because they were farming or split running. But there's a lot of guilds out there who are doing Mythic raiding bosses, who are 2-3 bosses down. They won't have tier sets on healers. And Resto Druid tier set is one of the best HPS tier set there is. So Resto Druids are going to start getting tier sets. They're going to get the 5% buff, which is already live. And I predict the rest of Druids will climb and climb in terms of pure HPS. I don't think rest of Druid is going to beat out Preservation Evoker, but I think it's going to be pretty close eventually when everyone gets, how do I say, all the gear that they need. So my advice for a lot of people, keep an eye out on rest of Druid in terms of pure HPS. It's probably going to climb and climb. Now in terms of race to world first, not a lot of guilds did include rest of Druid in their first kills for some of the high-end bosses. Again, Liquid did include rest of Druid for some of the tries and things like that, so that's something to consider. But again, one of the best raid healers or healers to bring in raid is going to be Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin was included by pretty much every single top-end guild, at least one Holy Paladin. That is purely because you need tank healing. Double Preservation Evokers on last boss are great in terms of AoE healing, but the sustained single target healing that Preservation Evokers provide is pretty much abysmal. So you need a Holy Paladin for that tank healing. Holy Paladins still provide good... Again, you can see the healing is still very good from Holy Paladins. The HPS is very good considering that they do provide damage reduction cooldown from things like Devo Aura, 3% damage reduction for everyone. And then you can use Aura Mastery to bump that number to 15%, which requires no stacking whatsoever. So Holy Paladin, pretty much a staple in any raiding guild. You'll need at least one Holy Paladin. Again, a lot of people, a lot of the guilds will include one Holy Paladin. Resto Shaman, again, I looked through a lot of logs. Not a lot of race to world first guilds included Resto Shaman, but there were quite a few Resto Shamans doing mythic raiding bosses, and they did decently well. Again, Resto Shamans are viewed as pretty bad healers right now. I don't think they're as bad as people make it out to be, but I think Resto Shamans need a buff in the community perception. The community needs to view Resto Shamans as more viable as they are right now, because they're not as bad as people make it out to be. Holy Priest, again, a lot of people were including at least one priest in their roster. Liquid end up, again, how do I say it? The first half of the race, Liquid end up running a bunch of priests, and there's multiple reasons for that. Again, if you have a really good Discipline Priest, and I'm going to include Discipline Priest and Holy Priest in the same section here. If you have a really good Discipline Priest who knows how to ramp properly, Discipline is going to be really good. If you're not sure how to play your Discipline Priest properly, or let's say if there's a lot of movement and you can't really set up your ramps properly, you should play Holy Priest. Holy Priest is a lot easier to play, it's a lot more reactive, and it has a lot of HPS cooldowns. On top of that, both of the priest specs, again, all the priest specs, have PI, Power Infusion, which provides a lot of external DPS to your group. So there is a lot of pluses for playing a priest right now, and again, which spec you're going to be playing, it's going to be dependent on the player's skill, in my opinion, and on basically which fight you're approaching. And then you had a Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver Monk was actually included by some of the race to world first skills in terms of meta. They included some of them in some of the kills. But a lot of the times, Mistweavers did fall down because all of the top-end guilds look at the last boss, Razaget, and they were like, hey, we need 2 Preservation Evokers. They have a lot of utility, they have a lot of healing. And this kind of solidified the raiding roster for 4-man healing teams in terms of, hey, we need 2 Preservation Evokers for the last mythic boss because there's a lot of utility that Evokers provide and HPS. We need 2 Preservation. We need to have a tank healer in terms of, hey, Holy Paladin, damage reduction, really nice. And then we're going to finish off the raiding roster with 1 priest, and it's either going to be Holy or Discipline depending on, again, the player's skill more than anything else. And then if you had some 5 healer fights, you might look at something like Restoration Druid right now, who provides really high HPS, maybe Mistweaver Monk, and this is going to kind of solidify your choice in terms of trying to play or have an optimal mythic raid healing team. And this is somewhat evident based on the parse numbers right now, which showcases which healers are the most popular in this mythic raiding content. You'll notice Holy Priests are popular, Holy Paladins, Preservation Evokers, Restoration Druids. That's also to do with the fact that a lot of Mythic Plus players will do mythic raiding in order to gear up their character, because Resto Druid is one of the best Mythic Plus healers, and we'll talk about that in the next part of this video. And then you'll see a pretty sharp drop off in terms of other healers. You'll see Restoration Shamans, you'll see Discipline Priests because they require more skill and things like that. You'll see Mistweaver Monk being the least played healer. And this is nothing new. Mistweaver Monk was probably the most or the least played healer for a long time in Shadowlands, and the same trend is continuing, which is very, very sad. But again, guys, everything that I said here is complete nonsense if you don't want to do or push high-end mythic raiding. If you're trying to do, again, lower content, play the healer that you enjoy, play the healer that you really like. There is something about playing an underdog healer and doing really, really well. But if you're trying to push really high-end content, some of this information is going to be relevant. And if you're looking for a healer that just does really good HPS, Preservation Evoker is the #1 answer right now, with Resto Druid possibly climbing when people are getting those tier sets, because again, I talked about Resto Druid tier set. It is excellent in terms of pure HP. Yes, let's go and have a look at Mythic Plus. So what we see on the screen right now is Reddit.io unique healer class population for level 20 and up keys. Now 20 and up, this is extremely high end. Very few people are doing 20 and up keys and timing them, but you can see the trend right now. Restoration Druids, Preservation Evokers, Holy Priests are also coming in there, and as well as Holy Paladins. But there is, again, you can see what's happening here. There are 2 healers that are basically head and shoulders above everyone else. If you go down to 15s and up, you'll see the exact same thing. Restoration Druids, Preservation Evokers, Holy Priests. Again, Holy Priests are a little bit underrated right now, and we'll talk about it. But again, you'll see Holy Paladins and Restoration Shamans, Discipline Priests, and Mistweavers. Again, very little representation of the bottom 3 healers. Very little representation in terms of all the other healing specs. Now, all the data that you saw in Reddit.io is real player information. These are real players doing Mythic Plus keys, timing them, and things like that. And this can be kind of, how do I say, put into a ranking. And sub-creation, again, I'm going to put a big, massive disclaimer on this because people get angry. This is not my ranking. This is auto-generated ranking based on a bunch of runs ranging from 12 to 23, because 23 is one of the highest keys done to this date. And this is done by sub-creation website, auto-generated based on, hey, there is a bunch of Resto Druids doing keys, and they're timing those keys, and they're doing well. And this is what you see right now. And honestly, I don't disagree with this all that much. It's not unfair for me to say that Resto Druid and Preservation Evoker are head and shoulders above everyone else. If you watch my previous video about a month ago, I ranked these 2 healers above everyone else, significantly above everyone else, because they are doing really, really well, especially on the last Tyrannical week, which was grievous on bursting and required healers. Honestly, probably a lot of healers that are watching this video, they had nightmares about the last week. They had nightmares about that Tyrannical grievous bursting week. They probably didn't do a lot of keys. But if you're a Resto Druid, if you're a Preservation Evoker, you probably did quite well. And then you'll see Holy Priest that's emerging because it is a relatively easy healer to play. You have a much better version of Flash Concentration in terms of Lightweaver that's emerging in Dragonflight. And again, you had Mass Dispel in terms of bursting, and that was pretty good. Holy Paladin is also emerging as one of the better ones. And then you have the last 3 healers. Now, I don't fully agree with all of this because, hey, there is very few Mistweaver monks who are doing Mythic Plus or who are doing Mythic raiding, and therefore there's less chance of a success for them. So they cannot really climb. So even though Mistweaver is really down, it doesn't really mean that they can't do high-end keys. It doesn't mean that any of these healers can't do high-end keys. All this graph, auto-generated graph, is telling you that much more healers are preparing to play Resto Druid or Preservation Evoker, and they're timing keys. They're doing well. So why is that? And this is my explanation. This is my opinions because I've been playing Resto Druid, I've been playing Preservation Evoker, and I'm going to say it the way that it is. Resto Druid received a 5% healing buff, and this was done because of raid balancing. Because 5% healing buff for Resto Druid for Mythic Plus is an abomination. It is a change that is just crazy. Resto Druids are one of the top healers already in Mythic Plus content, and that 5% buff is going to trickle down in Mythic Plus balance. On top of that, Blizzard made that 5% healing increase to Resto Druids before all the healers were able to acquire their tier sets. Resto Druid tier set is one of the strongest tier sets in terms of pure HPS. It is very, very strong, and considering that Mythic Plus is more about, hey, can you keep us alive versus can you provide the most damage, there's been a big shift in terms of how you approach Mythic Plus dungeons. It is far more about keeping people alive. I believe the Resto Druid in a month or so, when people are getting the best gear, when people are getting the tier set, is going to be the one and only best healer in Mythic Plus. Now, Blizzard did say there's going to be some decent class reworks happening in 10.05, and again, we're not sure when that's going to be released, but there are some significant changes happening to a bunch of healers in terms of new talents. There is going to be shift in meta or possible shift in meta, but my predictions right now, I do think that Resto Druid is going to be the undisputed king of Mythic Plus. Again, the 5% buff, the tier sets, people are getting the best gear. I think Preservation Evoker is still going to be one of the top healers, but it's going to be behind Resto Druid because I've done a bunch of plus 20 keys and things like that, tyrannical keys with Preservation Evoker, and while I think Preservation Evoker's burst healing potential is unmatched by anyone else out there, there are just too many bosses out there where the range limitations are really awkward, where the sustained single target healing is really hard for preservation. So I do think preservation has big advantages, especially when you need to dispel bleeds, and you can do mass dispel, almost mass dispel of bleeds with stasis, which makes certain fights really nice for preservation. But there are far too many dungeons or far too many boss fights right now in the dungeon pool where I think to myself, this range requirement is really annoying, single target sustain healing is a bit of a problem, and I say to myself, this dungeon would be way easier as a Resto Druid. So this is my opinion. I think Resto Druid is going to be the undisputed king if nothing changes. I don't want people to be too discouraged, but I think this auto-generated list by a website is somewhat accurate. Maybe a couple of things could have changed in the bottom tiers, but again, this is real player information. This is not me ranking. This is what the game sees. This is what the community perception sees. People are leaning towards Resto Druid and they're leaning towards Preservation Evoker. The difference between Restoration Druid and Resto Shaman or Mistweaver Monk or Discipline Priest is severely significant. There is a lot of differences, especially in that tyrannical week where you had a lot of HPS requirements. In my opinion, Resto Druid is going to be one of the undisputed kings of Mythic Plus. I think Preservation Evoker is weaker than Resto Druid because Preservation Evoker has more issues to deal with on certain dungeons, and Preservation Evoker was exposed during this tyrannical week, especially if you're doing poke content. I think it's a lot easier to play Resto Druid. I think Resto Druid provides more solid HPS, and I think the utility of battle res is pretty important because right now not a lot of people have crafted those braces to provide you with battle res. I actually don't like the system in terms of how battle res is acquired right now, but that's not the direction of the video. I don't want people to be sad if you're playing a Holy Priest, if you're playing Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus. This is just what is happening right now. There is errors in healer balancing in Mythic Plus. There's some errors in terms of healer balancing for raiding, but I think the Mythic Plus healer balance is pretty bad right now because these two healers are really far ahead of everyone else. I think Resto Druid to some account could be counted as the best healer right now because hey, in Mythic Plus it is the undisputed king, and in raiding it's going to climb and become better HPS healer. Is it going to be better than Preservation Evoker? No. So if you're a type of healer, or if you're a type of player who's looking to play meta or is looking to play the best of the best, Mythic Plus, Restoration Druid, an undisputed choice. In raids, Preservation Evoker at this time being. So that is going to be the summary of my video. These two healers are doing really well. There is going to be changes in 10.05, which will probably shake up the meta a little bit, but honestly, I'm still not sold on how the changes are going to really impact Mythic Plus, because I just think those two healers in terms of Restoration Druid and Preservation Evoker, they're just so strong right now. But guys, let me know how you feel about the healer balance in Mythic Plus, how you feel about the healer balance in raiding, and let me know how you feel about the healer requirements in Mythic Plus. Healing Mythic Plus is substantially harder than it was in Shadowlands. Do you think it is a good change or a bad change? And how do you feel about how those top two healers are feeling versus all the bottom tier healers? Is the balance right? Should there be nerfs? Should there be buffs? What could change in the future? Let me know how you feel about this. And again, if you like the video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next guide.